Hello and welcome to today's livecast. I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I'm excited to be here today. I have a little surprise today where I asked Stonemaier ambassadors if they had any questions that they wanted me to answer live on one of these livecasts. And I got a long list of questions. So over on my other screen, I have some questions in case we run out of things to talk about today. I will jump over here. It might take multiple livecasts to actually get through all these questions. I'll kind of treat them quick fire. There's around 70 of them. So we definitely won't get through all those today, but I do have some of those to look at today. But as always, you all are welcome to ask me any questions that you may have. I see a few of you talking about Paella, which I mentioned in the title of today's livecast. Yesterday, we went to the farmer's market for a special that one of the people who has a regular stand at the farmer's market does maybe once a month in the summer that I didn't know about till this year, where he makes a giant paella. I'll have to post it on... I haven't posted on Instagram today. Maybe I'll post it on Instagram after I get off today's livecast so you can see how big it is. The pan was probably around, not a full wingspan, but I would say around 4 to 6. I'm sorry, 3 to 4 feet wide. It was a giant pan of paella, and it was a vegetarian paella. So I think there's lots of different versions of paella, and this one was vegetarian, which is nice for us because we eat primarily pescatarian. So Megan and I had a nice stroll in the park yesterday, part of our celebration of our 5th anniversary week. Megan and I have been together for 5 years, and I'm really lucky to have her in my life, and it's been a fun week to celebrate being together with her. So that's a fun thing going on in my life this week. I hope you're doing well. If you're celebrating anything, let me know in the comments here. Steve said his cat wants to know why the Expeditions expansion box is too small for her to fit into. Well, you could explain to her, as all cats know, that expansion boxes are often meant to be recycled, and the components can fit into the core game insert in the box, and that's the plan for Expeditions. Your cat knows this. I think she's just being a little sassy about it, and that is the case with Expeditions. We made the box. It doesn't quite look like it, but it is recyclable. Because we didn't use the plastic varnish coating that a lot of game boxes have on them that you probably don't even realize they have on them. Most game boxes have this, but expansion boxes don't need them because they're often recycled. And so you can definitely recycle the Expeditions box. Helen says that her Gears of Corruption arrived earlier today. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Helen. I'm glad to hear it arrived. And I guess a quick shipping update about the Expeditions expansion. It is currently shipping to champions. I think the champion ship out should finish for all 4 fulfillment centers by the end of this week. So if you haven't gotten the notification yet, but you are a champion, you can still expect it to receive that notification by the end of this week. And then non-champion orders should start next week and should probably end next week too. So if you are not a champion and you pre-ordered or you bought a copy of Gears of Corruption from the Stonemaier Games web store, you should get a shipping notification sometime next week. If you ordered it from someone else, like your preferred retailer, that's awesome too. The retail release date is July 26th. We are still out of stock in most regions. We sold out faster than expected, and this is a good opportunity for us to revisit all the formulas that we use for calculating how many copies of anything to make, especially an expansion where it's a known entity where we're kind of talking about it in advance. And I'm really sorry for all those of you who really wanted a first run copy and weren't able to get it. We really did sell through them way too fast. No one should have to show up in the first few hours of a product launch to get that product. We want to have products in stock for ideally a few months. So a few weeks of the launch and then a few months after that for a trickle of orders and the retail release. And so I'm really sorry about that. I really, really am. I would love for everyone to have an expansion copy in the first run. There is still hope, though. We are still finding copies at fulfillment centers. So as we complete these waves of fulfillment at fulfillment centers, we can then evaluate if we have extras, because we always add in a buffer there to account for missed deliveries, things like that. And there are plenty of copies going to retailers. So please check with your preferred retailer. Let them know that you're interested in buying it. And they should be able to tell you with some level of certainty by the end of June if they will have a copy for you. Yeah, so that's the news about Gears of Corruption so far. I see some other people getting their shipping notifications. A few people have mentioned, including Chad here, and I'll remember to post comments here, that we used kind of a recycle-friendly packaging to store the mechs. And I'll show you what it looks like in my copy of Gears of of corruption, especially the metal mechs. And really, it worked really well in our test. But we have been getting some reports. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it looks like. So we used all cardboard. They're kind of wedged in here, but we're getting some reports that somehow some of them have broken free of the corrugated cardboard down here. And sometimes when that happens, the mechs, which are glued together at the factory, come apart. So we are evaluating this, obviously, for the next printing. But for those of you who are receiving your metal mechs now, if you're finding any of them slightly disassembled in the box, they're not intended to come like that. And as Chad mentioned in his comment here, you can glue them back together. That is the ideal way to deal with a metal mech, because they are originally glued at the factory. It isn't some defect. It is glue is a normal way to assemble mechs or plastic miniatures. Or metal miniatures. So feel free to glue yours back together. And if you don't want to do that, we are obviously here for replacement parts, but we do have limited replacement parts. So if you don't mind trying the glue solution first, that's awesome. And then if that doesn't work, let us know and we'll help you out. Tristan says, I've been waiting for the Ironclad base game to become available before considering the Ironclad expansion. Totally fine to do that, Tristan. I should say that we aren't planning on reprinting the Ironclad core game. It doesn't seem like there's enough demand for that specific product. However, we are going to make the metal mechs specifically for it. So at some point, whenever you're ready, you can buy the standard version of the core game, which will be the version that will be available. And later this year, we should have the 5 metal mechs from that core game available for you to switch out the plastic mechs. And there are plenty of people looking for plastic mechs to paint. And so you could, if you don't want to paint the plastic mechs for fun, I bet you could easily find someone who wants them. Ray says, when you play with a new expansion, do you always add the corrupted mech module? That is, I don't know if you're asking me personally, Ray, or just in general. In general, it is entirely your choice. It is an optional module to add. So yeah, entirely your choice there. For me, I think it depends a little bit. If I'm teaching new players how to play expeditions, I will use all the expansion stuff because it's entirely seamless to add in that stuff, except for the gears, for the corrupted mech module. But otherwise, I'll add it in there. Gary says he's getting married in July after being together for 11 years. Congratulations, Gary. Just had a stag do celebration with a geek retreat where 6 of us played board games in a cabin retreat. That's awesome, Gary. I'm glad to hear that. Congratulations. Kevin says, I know that figuring out how many copies of a game and expansion to print must be a difficult decision to make. It is. In general, what percentage drop do you see in expansion sales versus the base game? Yeah, that is one of the elements that we consider when printing an expansion, Kevin. Typically for expansions, we see, and it does vary over the lifespan of the game, but we see expansions selling around 30 to 40% of the base game. So for example, if we've made 100,000 copies of expeditions, then we might see 30 to 40,000 copies of the expansion being sold. So that was one of the factors that we thought about when deciding how many Ironclad versions of the expansion to make and how many standard versions to make. For example, the Ironclad version, we had sold, I believe it was around 18,000 Ironclad versions of the core game. We ended up making 5,000 versions of the expansion. That is on the lower end of the 30 to 40%, of course, but we really hadn't gotten that many people indicating that they wanted the Ironclad version of the expansion or the expansion at all. So that was one of the reasons it was a bit of a surprise to us that demand was so high for it once we actually launched it. DJ says, now they'll probably make another expansion. Oh, I think there's a continuation of another comment that I missed, DJ. Sorry about that. He says, can you talk about the decision-making process Stonemaier uses for making expansions? Is it primarily on perceived customer demand or the designer wanting to further explore the game? It's a little combination of the two, but even if I ever want to further explore a game, but there doesn't seem to be demand for it, then I don't explore it. But so it's a combination of the two, a desire for me to explore it or whoever the designer is, and a perceived desire from customers. So So yeah, you summed it up pretty well. Those are the two factors that we think about when making an expansion, and then we dive into, or often I dive into, either personally if I'm the designer or as a developer if the designer is someone else, we dive into what we might include in that expansion. This process happens after the core game is released for any game, or after the previous expansion is released for any game. Yeah, so I guess at some point this summer I might start thinking about and brainstorming if we should make another Expeditions expansion. But I want to give the current expansion a little bit of time to breathe before I think about that and see what people's reactions are to it. Cliff says, thanks, Cliff. This is a nice note. Just to thank you again for all your communication and transparency. I truly believe you and your company do more than anyone else in terms of trying to understand your customers' needs and fulfill them. You'll never be perfect, nor any of us, but you're doing a great job. Keep it up. Thank you, Cliff. That really does mean a lot to me. And I like the way that you said that. We really, really do try to serve our customers at Stonemaier Games. We try. And the key word there was try. We don't always succeed. You're right. We can't ever be perfect, but we can try. I think striving to improve and do better, and keeping in mind that our goal is always to serve you, has been a huge, I think, force for good at Stonemaier Games over the last 12 years. Julio is joining us today. He says, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to film a video with you. So Julio was on this past weekend's video about great graphic design in games, our favorite games that have really great graphic design. Thank you, Julio, for joining me for that chat. It was great to hear your insights on that video. And he says, it's weird listening to myself. Do you watch your own videos? Very rarely. Sometimes I have to figure out like the timestamps of a video, but no, I don't like listening to myself on recordings at all, really. So no, I try to avoid that if I can. While I have a slight pause here, let me hit a few topics real quick in case any of you want to talk about them more. So we talked about graphic design on the video. I talked about digital games in a recent blog post last week. What was my blog? I kind of did an update about, and I'll probably do a video about Board Game Arena soon. On Monday, I talked about pre-mortems, the idea of doing a post-mortem before a project even begins, to think about what could possibly go wrong and how to address it in advance. That was in relation to the Trekking the World 2nd edition, which is on Kickstarter right now. The chocolate of the day today, some celebrity endorsed this chocolate, and I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good. And they weren't paid to endorse it. They just liked this chocolate and talked about it. So Vanilla Crunch Dark Chocolate. Tried this, really enjoyed it. Really, really good. It's kind of a hearty chocolate bar. So I've had one hearty piece a day for the last couple of days, and I really enjoyed it. Megan picked it up from the grocery store recently. So that's Who. Do you have a treat for the day? What is your treat or your indulgence of the day? So we have paella. I've got chocolate. I also mentioned The Devil's Plan in today's title. This is a Korean reality competition show that aired on Netflix last year, and we just watched it over the last week, and we're completely hooked on it. We just finished it last night, so no spoilers. I won't give it away any spoilers, but if you love games, if you're watching this video and you love games, I highly recommend The Devil's Plan. The name of the show isn't really indicative of what the show is all about. Really, the worst part of the show is the name. It's a misnomer. The show is just a reality, fairly heavy game competition with some of the rules for the games lasting between 5 and 8 minutes of real-time explanation. So these aren't like these quick little, like on Survivor, they have challenges that take 10 seconds to explain. Lots more explanation going on into these rules. Very in-depth games that have social elements and memory elements, spatial elements. There's a polyomino game in it. There's a variety of memory games, a lot of math, like fairly heavy math games involved. It's a really neat show, really well done, especially if you like games. So I do highly recommend The Devil's Plan. We had a blast watching it over the last week. Mark says, what's the question of the stream today? I was looking around to see if I had a big question for today, but I think I'm going to rely on the ambassador questions to see if there is one that I want everyone to answer. So in a few minutes, I'll start poking around at some of these ambassador questions to see what they are. Let's see. Tim says, I feel that ironclad purchases might be more inclined to purchase the expansion because they are already more likely to be all in. Have you tried directly polling the people who have made the specific web store purchases as opposed to via the newsletter? Great question, Tim. So When people buy something from our web store, that does not give us permission to email them afterwards, other than things about their order. So what we did last year after the Expeditions launch was complete, we sent one email to all customers updating them on the status of their order, their shipping, kind of, it's an onboarding email to help them get into the game. And we said in that email that we're not emailing them anymore. They haven't signed up for a newsletter. They just placed an order. But if they wanted to get more notifications about Expeditions, that they could click here. There was a link in that email to sign up for a monthly or bi-monthly Expeditions and Scythe newsletter. So it's that newsletter that we on which I had a poll in October asking people if they were interested in buying the expansion. So there's a couple different layers there between how many people actually bought it and how many people we were able to contact to ask if they wanted the expansion. The thing that I think I messed up, though, is even though I sent that email and then I posted that email, the one with the survey, in the Expeditions Facebook group, and it was posted on our website, I don't think that was enough. I think I should have also posted that survey elsewhere, maybe to our ambassadors, to our champions, even to our general newsletter. Just broadcasted it more. Put the news out that we are polling and surveying for interest in an Expeditions expansion. Yes, I think the most avid followers are those who signed up for the Expeditions newsletter. But there are many people out there who are, I think, who bought Expeditions, who are interested in Expeditions, but just didn't want to receive a monthly newsletter. And I need to do a better job at making sure all those people see the survey, especially when we survey them about an expansion. So that's on me. Absolutely. Let's see. I see some news from Ian and Tim saying they got some fun products over the weekend from us. Ray says, is Jamey muted for anyone else or just me? I think it might be you, Ray, but if I'm just talking to myself here, everybody else, please let me know. It looks like my mic is on right now. Arama says, have you thought about the possibility of making a Rise of Fenris style campaign expansion for Expeditions and team up with Ryan? I have, Aramis. Yeah, I do have some ideas for future expansions if we decide to do it. And I have an ongoing email correspondence with Ryan about that possibility. At the same time, I have lost most of my interest in doing campaign games. I think there's just a too many of them right now that people haven't played, that people are trying to get to the table, that it's tough to get your group together for it. So I think a narrative expansion for Expeditions is possible, maybe even likely at this point. A campaign expansion, probably not, but we'll see. We'll see about that. Oh, awesome. Dominic went to Alaska recently and had some fudge there. That's great, Dominic. Hopefully you had a good trip up there. See some other people posting their summer trip information. Chad says, I feel like Jakob has started an intriguing story about the corruption. What is it? Where does it come from? If you do expand Expeditions more, I hope you can further the story or complete it. Yeah, I would love to be able to do that. I still have more to learn about the corruption myself from Jakob. So if he wants to add to that story in future expansions for Expeditions, I think that would be amazing. Benjamin says, if we find extras in fulfillment centers and sold out, how will we notify people to let them know? Great question, Benjamin. That is why it's really, really important to fill out the back in stock request. It's not even a form. It's just a place to put your email on our web store. So if you went to our web store and ever tried to order anything on our web store and you can't because it's out of stock, please enter your email in that back in stock form. It really is. It's not just helpful for us to notify you when it's back in stock, but it also tells us if it's something that we truly are out of stock of. It gives us a small indication of how many more we need to make. And oftentimes it's a matter of getting to a critical mass of people saying, yes, I want this, before we can justifiably start a new printing of a game or an expansion. So yeah, please fill out that. Just enter your email in that back in stock request dialog box on our web store. Thank you for asking about that. Ashley Feet says, I noticed Automa's in a lot of Stonemaier games. Is Automa a Stonemaier specific brand? So Automa Factory is a separate company from Stonemaier Games. It was kind of started in conjunction with us through designer Morten Monrad Peterson. I started working with him on solo stuff back when we made Tuscany in, I believe it was 2014. It's when we had the Kickstarter for Tuscany. So we were probably working together in 2013. In fact, I met Morten during the original Viticulture campaign virtually. But Automa Factory is a separate company than Stonemaier Games. It's just that we have a good, lasting partnership with them. Let's see, a longer question here. Let's say a multiple part question. I have a bit of a longer question. I designed and printed a storage tray for Wormspan so that I could simply pull out the trays and the components are ready to go. All right, let's see where the part 2 of the question is. I'll have to scroll back up to some other questions. I find being able to do this greatly improves the likelihood of a game hitting the table and improves my overall impression of the game. So how do you balance cost, eco-friendliness, and out-of-the-box experience? That's a great question. And I think you touched upon it here. I'm getting a little update on my other screen saying that it's trying to reconnect. So I'll keep talking. It's possible I'm not connected right now. We'll find out. But I think you asked that question really well because it is a balance of cost, eco-friendliness, and how easy it is for a game to get to the table. All those things are factored in. And with Wormspan, I mean, all those things, well, cost wasn't really that big of a part of it. Adding a simple plastic tray does not add that much cost. It was more about eco-friendliness and that for an out-of-the-box experience for cards, if they are sorted into a tray, you still have to take them all out of the tray and shuffle them. So cards being in a tray versus a bag, we find isn't all that different, except for the customer perspective. There is a perception, I think, that a game has gone a little cheap if they use bags for cards instead of a plastic tray or some sort of insert to hold those cards. It's a fair perception. I hear that, and it's something that we'll definitely take into account in the future. And I think I'm continuing to weigh so with plastic trays, there is the argument that, okay, if you make a really good plastic tray that people actually use, get to the table more often, you're not going to throw away that tray. You're actually going to use it if it's a well-designed plastic tray. So you're not hurting the environment that way. You're not adding plastic to the environment. Although arguably in 300 years, are you going to be playing your copy of Wormspan? Will your great-great-grandchildren be playing your copy of Wormspan? Hopefully, but probably not. So there's that, but there's also the input, and the input we can't ever ignore. The input of what went into actually making that plastic tray, both in terms of the natural resources and the factory that had to make that tray. So that's the eco side of it as well. So it's something that we're always balancing. It's a balancing act, as you say here. Great question. Kevin says, have I played The White Castle? I have. Yeah, I did a fairly recent video about The White Castle. I really enjoyed my first play of it at Geekwood of the West. And you're right. Only 9 turns to figure it out. It's a fun puzzle to figure out in 9 turns. Michael says he likes what I said about having a narrative expansion, but not a campaign expansion. And I think what we can even do is something that I'm exploring in Vantage a little bit, that you can have narrative in games that is not a campaign, that you can learn that narrative in various orders. But there just is more written text in the game if you enjoy that written text. Vantage doesn't have that much written text. I don't want to throw that much. I don't want to stop the gameplay for too much written text in an expansion for expeditions, but the right amount of text I think could hit the sweet spot. Ian says that June has been horrible for him so far. I'm sorry, Ian. I'm really sorry to hear that. I hope Gears of Corruption helps make your month a little bit better, and that in general your month gets better as well. Luke says, I wonder if there should be 2 CTAs. I don't know what CTA is. Click through attempts with your final email from a base game. Click here to join a newsletter. Click here to receive a notice about future expansions. We do, yeah, Luke, I'm glad you said that, but we do that for our core newsletter as well. You can go back and look at most of them. It's not in all of them, but it's in most of our core general monthly newsletters that they say, if you want to go subscribe to this brand specific newsletter, you can go do that. That's in our main primary monthly newsletter as well. Ray says, for the new characters, Balion and Zephon, would you say the best counter against them is to make sure they can't get meteors? That's a good question. Usually when I'm playing expeditions, I'm not trying to prevent other players from doing things. I'm just trying to optimize what I'm doing. So, yeah, that's an interesting question. It's a different way of thinking about the game than I usually think about. Maxime says, "Is the Metal Mechs version of will the Metal Mechs version of Expeditions be able to purchase all alone in one day?" We don't have the Ironclad of the French version. Thank you for your question, Maxine. So what we're doing for the future of Expeditions is that we probably will do a reprint of the Ironclad, the English Ironclad version of the expansion. We probably will not do that for the English version of the core game, but we will be making metal mech packs, both for the core game and for the expansion. So if you have a different language version, or if you have the English version of either of those, of the standard version of them, and you want the metal mechs, we will be selling them separately as their own product later this year. Yeah, we're going to work on starting to make those soon. Okay, Tim says, how do you determine if something needs balance or not after a game is released? Playtesting groups pull stats like Tapestry? So for Tapestry, yeah, I mean, we collected, in fact, for several of our games, we use leaderboards to collect data from customers who are actually playing our games. We don't get a ton of data from those, but it is enough to help inform expansions, oftentimes in the future, a little bit. We also just pay attention to what people are saying about our games. Consumers, people who just regular people who are playing our games and are asking questions and making comments on Board Game Geek, on the comments on our website, in the Facebook groups, on Discord. So we pay attention. It's not always data. Oftentimes it's anecdotal, but we do pay attention to a lot of what people say and try to factor that into future decisions, whether it's for that brand of games or if it's for other games as well. Oh, cool. Zeb points out that Dead Reckoning does that with their Saga system. I haven't played their Saga system in Dead Reckoning. I've only played the core game, but I have heard that they did something really cool with adding narrative in an expansion without making you play through a campaign. So I need to look into that. I'm just looking through questions here. As always, if you do ask a spoiler question, I skip over it. So anything that I haven't revealed yet or I'm not talking about yet, I'll skip over it. But I do appreciate your curiosity if I ever do skip over that sort of thing. Paige says, interesting thought experiment that popped into her head today. What would be some fun games to play at a Pride-themed game night and why? So she likes, an example is Sagrada because it has a lot of rainbow dice. Yeah, it's a great question. I like the rainbow theme games with a lot of colors. Downforce has a very colorful color palette. Yeah, other games, I guess we'll start with the rainbow as a starting point, but there are other ways to look at and celebrate Pride and celebrate our LGBTQ friends and community as well. So I love that question, Paige. Tim says he's trying to get into role-playing games. We recently purchased Paranoia. I know you're more into tabletop games, but do you have any RPGs that you enjoy that you'd recommend? I have played very, very few RPGs, Tim. In fact, the last time I really played an RPG, a role-playing game, was a Star Wars role-playing game when I was a teenager. So it's been so long. I can't recommend anything personally. I have heard of a cool one that I think I'd like to play at some point. I think it's called like 11 Candles or 10 Candles, something like that, where the length of the game is determined by candles burning out, actual candles that you're lighting that are burning out over the course of the game. I hope you enjoy Paranoia. And if anyone has any recommendations of RPGs that they really enjoy, let me know in the comments here. It's a topic that I think has come up on these live casts from time to time. I am generally interested, I think, in a one-off or maybe 1 to 2 session RPG rather than an ongoing campaign. Diana says, any info as to when Tapestry will be back in stock? Thank you for asking about that, Diana. It's possible that it might be in stock with some retailers, but on our web store, in fact, it might be in stock in some of our web stores, but not other web stores at Stonemaier Games. We do have a reprint in process. Let me see if I can quickly find that answer using one of the documents that we have. Okay, we actually do. It looks like it's coming in July. So we should have it back in stock sometime in July. That's great news. Yeah, thank you for asking about that. Oh, Joshua points out that Dead Reckoning's Saga system borrows from Rise of Fenris, even though it's a campaign. Rise of Fenris is a campaign system. It would be cool to see us go back and borrow from something that they borrowed from. I remember that I think the designer credited Stonemaier Games a little bit with the Rise of Fenris in that expansion. I heard that. I haven't seen that. Kevin says that Artisans of Splendid Vale is a great game with a lot of LGBTQIA plus representation, but it's more of a campaign game. That's fine. That's fine. Any recommendations for Pride Month games? I'm happy to hear them. Games I've been playing recently, we played another game of Betrayal Legacy. We're very, very slowly going through that campaign. We played Planet Unknown with 6 players at game night. That's a polyomino game where you're creating a planet. Really, really satisfying game that you can play simultaneously. So it's a heavier game that you can play simultaneously. And then Charcuterie. I've enjoyed my first 2 plays of a tile placement game called Charcuterie, where you're making a charcuterie plate for to score points, kind of like in Cascadia. It's kind of like Cascadia, but with a food platter, which I think is really clever. We also played disc golf. Megan and I partnered up for a doubles match on Monday. They call it a league play. So it's a little bit the feel of a tournament, but it's pretty casual. So we had a good time doing that. And this week, before I forget, this is Rolling Realms live play week. So today, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 3:00 on YouTube, I will be playing through Rolling Realms. And the first set of realms that I'll be playing with today are Obsession, Potion Explosion, and Parks. These are the 3 realms that I'll be playing with in game 69, round 1. So we're almost up to game 70. And so if you look on the Facebook group or on Discord, you can propose fan-designed realms, unpublished fan-designed realms that I might play for game 70 if you want to submit any for consideration. Let's see, Claudio says, are you considering including MDF inserts as a middle ground between plastic and no insert? MDF. I must admit, I'm not familiar with MDF. Can you let me know a little bit more about that? Maybe it's a term I've heard of and I just don't recognize the acronym. Julio, who joined me for this video this past Sunday, says, since we recorded the video, I had a lot of thoughts of what I could have said or said better, which makes me cringe a bit, but I do hope the video goes well. I do think we hit some good points. I agree. And I can totally relate to what you're saying, that I often think back upon conversations or things that I've recorded and try to realize that there's a better way I could have acted, a better way I could have said it, a more effective way I could have said it. But I think one of the great things about the internet is that you can jump in the comments and share things that you think about in the future. There are a lot of actual videos that I've filmed where I go back and add to the I add a note saying, yeah, I made this top 10 list, but now I've played this game. This game probably would have been on this list, that sort of thing. Yeah. So you can always add to the comments. And Julio, you can always email me and I can add to the description of the video as well if you'd like. Helen recommends, so we're talking about RPGs a little bit. Tim had a question about RPGs. She says, Blades in the Dark is great, has an awesome flashback mechanism. Oh, that's cool. It's fantasy themed set in a fictional city of Doskvul, inspired by Victorian London and Gothic fiction. Ian says, will the Tapestry Civilization Pack be coming back in stock soon? Let's look at my list here to see what it says about the Tapestry Civ Pack. It's not on the shipping list, so it's on a different list. Approximate arrival also says July here, but because I'm not seeing it on the shipping list, I'm kind of doubting that. So maybe August? Maybe August for that? Joshua says, you said that you designed Tapestry as your version of a Civ game. That is definitely true. Other than Vantage, open world, do you have any other styles of games that you've wanted to try your hand at making? Yeah, I mean, Tapestry was like, it was the Civ game that I always wanted to exist. It was a Civ game where I wanted players to be able to create their own history that isn't held back, I think, in some ways, by actual people, places, and things in real world history. So, and Vantage is kind of that version of that for open world. You're absolutely right. It is the open world game that I've always wanted to exist. And I played some great open world games, but I wanted one with a truly full sense of freedom. You can walk in any direction anytime. You're not always starting at the same place. You're almost always starting at different places, and you have a huge range of options as to what you can do at any given time in the game. I don't know. Those two have been on my mind for so long that I don't know if I have another specific genre where I'm like, I love this genre, but nothing in this genre really, really exists that I truly love. The only thing I can think of a little bit. So there are 2 fictional genres that I love. I love heist fiction and I love time travel and time loop fiction. There is Time Stories, which does hit that time loop fiction pretty darn well. Probably, I would say better than I could ever do. So I don't know if I'll go into time travel and time loop. There are some good heist games out there too. I don't know if I've ever played a heist game that fully captures what I love about heist fiction, though. And maybe it's not even possible. But that is one. That's a genre. That's a theme that I'm interested in exploring someday in a game. Yeah. Monkey Butler says, MDF is medium density fiberboard. It's incredibly dense and heavy that I can't imagine it's shipping cost friendly. Interesting. Yeah. Also sounds kind of difficult to mold. As you could see when we experimented with sugarcane pulp trays, they end up, even though they cost more to make than plastic trays, they end up looking cheaper. So there's a problem of perception there, right? Even we've spent more to make something to be friendly to the environment. We've made something that is less detailed than what it could be in plastic because of limitations of the sugarcane pulp, and customers think that we went cheap on making it, even though we spent more. So I think we've started to move away from that, and probably will make some plastic trays instead of those in the future. Yeah. Chad has a question for anyone. I think he has a love-hate relationship with simultaneous play games. I find that too often that the lure to cheat, I see, creeps up on him. Does this happen to anyone else, or am I a terrible person? Maybe a little terrible person, but not too bad. I guess what you're saying about cheating is in those styles of games, you maybe are a little bit more likely to do something and then take it back in real time. And I think that's almost fair game in those games. As long as it's during the simultaneous period, if you do something, you're like, oh, I could have done that a little bit differently. I mean, you see me do it live in Rolling Realms. As long as you haven't advanced to the next step where things are locked in, I think that's kind of fair game. I wouldn't necessarily even call that cheating, but I'm curious to see what other people think. Tim says, I'm not sure if you're a System of a Down fan, the band, but their singer Serge Tankian has a memoir called Down with the System that talks about life as an immigrant and entrepreneur that he recommends. Thank you for recommending that, Tim. I love good book recommendations. Right now, I'm reading a great book by Austin Grossman called Fight Me, which is Austin Grossman writes, on occasion, he writes great superhero fiction. He wrote one called, it's like Tomorrow I Will Be Invincible, something like that. And this is a completely separate book or world called Fight Me about, it's kind of like, I think it's pitched as the Breakfast Club meets the Avengers. And that's, I think, a pretty good summary without me spoiling more about the book. But yeah, that's Austin Grossman. Fight Me is a book recommendation that I'm really enjoying right now. And Tim, I appreciate your recommendation as well. Luke says The Spanish Prisoner was a fun heist film. You know, I don't think I've seen The Spanish Prisoner, so I will make a note about that for my movie list. The Spanish Prisoner. We watched actually a great movie that's not quite a heist movie, but adjacent to that genre, called Hitman. It's on Netflix, the new movie on Netflix. That's about not a hitman, surprisingly. It's about someone who poses as a hitman. Really, really good movie. Like really, really good. Surprisingly good. Way better than I had any expectations for. Hitman on Netflix. I wrote a blog post about that the other day. Michael says, I see Smitten in the background. Yeah, and I know you typically stay in a certain range of games. Do you have plans, or would you ever consider making another lighter game? So we did Smitten specifically because it's a game that we could easily give away. You can see here 10 years at Stonemaier Games. That's something that we made for our 10-year celebration a couple years ago. So I think it's fairly unlikely that we would make a game this light, this small again, unless we did like a sequel to Smitten. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility, but there are many things about Smitten that don't fall into our normal constraints. It only plays 1 to 2 players. It's very light. There isn't really a component hook other than it's cool to see the cards come together. It plays in a very short amount of time. So I think it's unlikely, but we have anniversaries, we have April Fools. So we have times of the year where we can do things that are a little bit outside the box for us. Kevin says, have you read An Ember in the Ashes? Is that Saba Tahir? Is that the author? Is that the author of it? If so, I have read it. If not, I don't think so. Yeah. So finally, I have a slight pause in the questions. Let me see if I can answer a few quick ambassador questions, because they did ask this, and it might take some time to get through these. Approximately how much? So these are just in alphabetical order by question. Approximately how much does it cost to bring a game to life? Design, illustrating, printing, manufacturing, shipping, etc. It really depends on the game. Design is like, for us, we pay a $10,000 royalty to designers, and then that's an advance against royalties. So the amount of royalties we pay over time, it's a percentage of revenue. So that can really depend on how many copies the game says. sells. Illustration, usually around $20,000 to $30,000 for us. For our games, we pay a lot. We pay our artists, I think, pretty well, and we pay. We don't use AI art, and we pay for that art. But you can find artists. Depends on the amount of art in the game too. Like a game like Spittin' only has kind of one illustration, maybe 9, maybe 1, depending on how you look at it. Printing each unit of a game, that varies vastly from a game too. There's games that cost $1 to print, and there are games that cost $20, $30 to make. So that's big range. Printing, manufacturer, the same thing. Shipping, freight shipping, depends on how big the game is, and also depends on both for freight shipping and fulfillment. That depends on how big and heavy the game is. Are there any plans for a Red Rising expansion now, since the second trilogy was expanded? So there's still one book left in the second trilogy. We are still considering doing something else in the Red Rising world, another game expansion, something else, but we haven't quite decided yet to what exactly we're going to do. I'll do one more, then I'll come back to the live questions. Can you do a Rolling Realms 101? I feel like I miss a lot of basics. That is a good reminder to me that on today's video, game 69, I will do a refresh of the rules. So I know I don't often do that now when I'm playing through Rolling Realms, but I will do a quick refresh about how the game works in Rolling Realms, so that to answer that question. Yeah. William has a more judicious answer to this, and Chad, I was just joking. I don't think you're a terrible person at all. I think it's very rare that there are any terrible people at all. I think everyone does things that are good and bad, and cheating at a game or taking back a move into the game is one of the smallest things I think that you could do. He says, perhaps I am perhaps William is, because I think other players might cheat in simultaneous games. He thinks that. So I don't have many, and I don't play them unless on Board Game Arena. Someone brought up that interesting point about digital games recently, that you can't really cheat when you're playing a game digitally, but you can on the tabletop, accidentally or purposely. Corey recommends Money Heist. I have watched part of the first, I think I watched like the first season of Money Heist. It felt, maybe I need to continue to watch it a little bit more. But it felt, it felt a little manipulative. Like, I think there was information the show could have shown me that was fair game to show, that they withheld until the right moment to spring it on the viewers. And I think that's fine. But I think some of the best heist fiction gives you all the information, and you have to, you are kind of figuring it out. Maybe you're a few steps behind the people in the show who are figuring it out, but you at least have that information to potentially figure out. I still think one of the best heist movies of all time, and it's an example of this, is Inside Man. The movie Inside Man, I think, is still, I think, the top 3 for me heist movies ever made. Jan Williams says, what's often surprising me is that you see game creators releasing their games through various companies. In the music industry, artists are often signed to a label for many years. Do you think an exclusive relationship with a game designer works in a different way, or would you prefer to work exclusively with certain designers? I don't like to use the word exclusive at all. Like, I don't want to ever lock someone into working with me. And I don't want to work just with certain people for at least game design. They're like, I only want to have one accounting team. I don't want to have a dozen different accounting teams. I don't want to have a dozen different lawyers, things like that. But for game design, I want to work with a variety of different people, and I want those designers to feel free to work with a variety of different people as well. I found, for example, that I work really well with Connie Vogelman. I think she is one of the best designers in the world right now. Connie is the designer of Apiary, of Wormspan, and of other upcoming games. I think Connie is absolutely amazing. And I'm using Connie as an example of all of our designers that we work with. I think they're all amazing. But like, even with Connie, I am happy to continue to work with her. But I also hope that Connie hears from other publishers as well, because I think relying too much on one publisher as a designer isn't a great position for the designer. And I want to look out for our designers. I want them to have a variety of options. It's like diversifying your investment portfolio. You don't want to invest all of your money in one stock, because, I mean, maybe you'll get lucky and that stock will do awesome, but more than likely, some bad things will happen to that stock over the years. And so if you have a little bit more diversity in your portfolio and the people that you work with, you have a better chance of, I think, surviving and thriving, which is what we want for our designers. I say our designers as if they're mine. They're not. The designers that we work with. Luke says, "Do you want me to make some art for your future games?" We're pretty selective about our artists, but yeah, I mean, if you have great art that's a good fit for our games, let me know. Absolutely. Let's see. Surety says, I'm a ways behind, but it would be great to mention and post a link to the surveys about interesting expansions in these videos as well. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mentioned a lot of different places, but I don't often post them in the videos. So yeah, actually, you're calling me out on it here. In the description of this video, when I'm not live anymore, I will post the apiary expansion survey, which we recently posted in a variety of places, but I'll add it to this place as well. So we currently have an apiary expansion survey that we're using to gauge interest in the apiary expansion. And so I will post it in the description after I get off live. I can't do it live, but I'll do it in a few minutes. So thank you for asking about that. That's a good idea. Ian's working for his YouTube channel where there's a wills, there's a play. He is working on some tutorials for some realms today. Thank you, Ian, for doing that. I really appreciate that. So that it addresses one of the previous questions a little bit about Rolling Realms 101, although I think this person was looking for a general overview of the rules, not realm specific. But Ian, I appreciate you making those videos. Surety says, as a general question, are there any disc golf discs good for beginners? I want to start playing with my son, but haven't played since summer camp decades ago. So you can go on like Amazon and order a starter set of discs. They're not going to be the best discs because the type of plastic used in disc golf discs really does make a difference. There is an Innova, so that's INNOVA. There's an Innova starting set that is pretty good. That is a decent starter set. But you could also go to Stonemaier Games. I know it's going to cost a little bit more, but we use pretty good plastic in the discs that we make, and we make them with Innova. Innova has a whole range of plastics that they use. So if you do want to get back into disc golf, you really only need 3 discs. You need a putter, you need a mid-range, and you need a driver. And you can find all of them on the Stonemaier Games web store. And you know that if you get them from us, that, I don't know, there's a nod to Stonemaier Games. So you can have that fun part of it, even if you don't end up using the discs. And it's going to be good plastic. So feel free to check that out. Michael says, do you have a game that you're itching to play? What am I itching to play right now? And I like that you left that open. It's not necessarily a new game. It could be an older game. What am I itching to play? Okay, well, here's one. Here's one that I'm curious about. I want to do a video about entangled benefits or benefit pairings, where you have a choice between sets of things, and those things have 2 different things that are randomized together. And so I'm trying to do a video about that. And one game that I've heard that has that mechanism that I haven't played is called Tiletum. And I need to play that. I want to play that. So I'm hoping to play Tiletum soon if I had the chance to play that. That would be new to me. Yeah. Oh, Chad has a nice question about my elbow. Speaking of disc golf, how's my elbow doing? Is it healing up? It's doing pretty well. I've been using, I mentioned this a few months ago. People gave me some advice. I got some little braces. I don't use these all that often, but I got these little braces that I can slide on the arm that puts a little pressure on a certain part of the arm like that. I've been using this a little bit, but more often, right after I disc golf, I have been icing with this like sleeve that goes over my arm. It's a cold pack sleeve that is awesome. I really, really like it. I use it a couple times a day just to keep it's my shoulder and my elbow. That's really been helping. Thank you for asking about that, Chad. Jeff says, following up about Red Rising, will you be waiting until book 7 is released? It'll kind of happen if and when it happens. It would be awesome if we do make something new for Red Rising, if we can release it around the same time as book 7. But it will be almost a coincidence if that happens. I don't know when book 7 will be ready. I don't know when the game will be ready. So yeah, we'll see. Hilda's here. Random question for everyone. We saw Broadway's Clue last week here in Orlando. And on the way home, it sparked the question, what games would make fun plays, TV series, or movies? Yeah, what games would make fun plays, TV series, or movies? And Hilda, that's good timing, too, with the Fallout series, which I thought was really awesome. The Fallout series based on a video game. I thought they did a great job with that series. Let's pop over and see what ambassadors are asking. Okay, and I know I can't put these on the screen, but this question is, dice are relatively uncommon in Stonemaier Games. Although I bet they're in more games than this person's thinking. But yeah, you're right. Not too common, although I do love custom dice. Have you ever thought about making a game that focuses on dice, either utilizing the roll 3 times mechanism for games like Yahtzee or King of Tokyo, the custom dice mechanism for games like Dice Forge, or a whole new mechanism, but a game focused on dice, not as workers? I would posit that we actually already have this. Let's go through the list of Stonemaier Games. I'll pull this up on the other screen here. Here's the list. Let's look at how many games have dice. Apiary doesn't have dice. The workers are similar to dice, but you're not rolling them, so we won't call that dice. Charterstone, there is a die it's a custom die, but not used very often in Charterstone. Euphoria, dice is workers, so we have that. Expeditions, no dice. Yeah, no dice in Expeditions. Libertalia, no dice. My Little Scythe, there are dice. They're custom dice that seed the board with resources. Pendulum, no dice. Red Rising, there is the Rising die that you use semi-often in Red Rising. Rolling Realms, game built around dice. So this would be the biggest answer to my question, that the dice game that we have is Rolling Realms. Scythe, and one of the expansions, there are some dice. Smitten, no dice. Tapestry, yeah, dice do several ways in Tapestry. The Science die, the Conquer dice, and I think it's just those two. Vantage, I won't reveal whether or not, well, I have said that there are custom dice in Vantage. I haven't revealed how they're used yet. Viticulture, no. Wingspan, yeah, a Wingspan and Wormspan. Oh, no, Wormspan, no. Wingspan, yes, with the dice and the dice tower. So what is that? Around 30% of our games do have dice. So I guess part of the spirit of the question is maybe there isn't, we aren't using the dice the way that this person wants us to. And I'm open. I love custom dice. I love using dice in games. So I think it is likely that you will see dice show up in future games. Maybe not games designed entirely around dice, but with dice as a core element of those games. Trishul says they just bought Viticulture World. What was the inspiration behind the seasonal workers module? That's a good question for the designers, Francesco and Mahir. I'm trying to remember what they said was the inspiration between the seasonal workers. As I can recall, I think they wanted to take the seasonal element of viticulture and put a twist on it. It is something that I recall going back and forth on, because I was like, how much should we ask people? How much new stuff should we ask people to learn for this expansion? And they ended up selling me on it. I ended up liking what they did with the seasonal workers. I thought it was pretty cool, but I think it was just to do something a little bit different, but there might be other reasons as well that I am forgetting. I think also what part of it was they wanted that the designers perceived a slight issue in viticulture being that it's generally better to train more workers, generally better to have more workers, because you don't have to pay for those workers after you already have them. So they wanted to counter that a little bit by not giving players a way to get more workers, but rather a way to let players decide if they wanted to make the workers they already have better. So I thought that was interesting. William says, Stonemaier only has the rights to the Scythe IP, so we're still holding out for Scythe the musical. That'd be fun. Let's see, another ambassador question. Do you like places like Disney World or Universal Studios? I know there can be some gamification when visiting those types of locations. Does something like that appeal to you? I have to be honest and say that I don't get, so I love behind the scenes peeks at things. But I don't get overly excited about going to theme parks. That isn't something that I generally seek out. However, I did get the opportunity to go to the Star Wars Star Cruiser, the Galactic Star Cruiser, the Halcyon, that is no longer available. And it was one of the best experiences of anything that I've ever done, ever. Travel experience, gaming experience, group experience. And that was at Disney World. And I'm so glad I got to do it. So if I had the opportunity to do something like that again in the future, I would be very excited to do that. Do you ever plan to attend Gen Con as an exhibitor again? If no, why not? Yeah, we've actually attended Gen Con as an exhibitor for many years now. I don't think we've really ever stopped doing that. So yeah, we'll be there this year. We were there last year. We were there the year before. Now, am I personally going to attend Gen Con? Kind of similar to my answer about Disney World. Gen Con is, I don't get excited about giant crowds. If I'm going to go to a convention, I'd much rather go and play games with people, connect with people in a quieter environment where we can just play games together. And Gen Con is not that. So is not out of the question that I will attend Gen Con sometime in the future, because I think it's fun to see people who are excited about our games. And I think for some people, it's exciting to see the people who create those games. So there's that. But I trust my team to do an amazing job at Gen Con. Dave does a great job at conventions. And I think our partners, MeepleSource, they do a wonderful job representing Stonemaier Games at conventions as well. And the many ambassadors that show up there. So I'm happy for them to do the convention part. I'm happy to stay here in St. Louis and do the game design, development, marketing, and customer service, and all the other things that I do at Stonemaier Games and that I really enjoy doing. Arthur says, would I consider giving a talk in a board game convention in Brazil? Our board game market is growing fast, but I still feel we lack good communicators to have deeper talks about game design. It's a great question. So every now and then people ask me this. I'm flattered when they ask. They want me to talk about game design. And I have a couple different answers to that. Part is that a lot of the content that I have about game design is already available. So it's on YouTube. You can use that content whenever you want, however you want. The other part of it is something that I found works really well for my schedule and for conventions. This is my desired format, my preferred format for speaking. And it's not actually going to the convention. There's a remote thing that I would do. Is if you have a special event or convention, and you have, I don't know the exact parameters of this, but the things that I've done basically is that when people have sent me a list of questions, they've emailed their attendees and they've said, hey, Jamey is happy to answer any of your questions on a video that he's going to make just for us, just for our convention. What questions do you have for him? And that coordinator puts together those questions. Sometimes they add some questions of their own. And they send me those questions and I film a video answering those questions. You've probably seen some of them on my YouTube channel because I use them on the YouTube channel as well. I've done this for classrooms. I've done this for events, and I'm happy to do it in the future. That is my preferred format. Doing a live format, I think there are multiple reasons why it does not work well to have someone show up live on Zoom. And for traveling, that is generally a much bigger impediment for me to do even beyond that. So this pre-recorded questions that are arranged specifically from your audience that I can answer for your audience, that is something that I am absolutely open to doing. Yeah. Ruse Games is popping in to say hi. Hello, Ruse Games. Let's see, we have a few more minutes. Let's see if we have a few more ambassador questions that I can get to. What's my favorite or most influential game designer? There's a lot of them. But probably there are a lot of them. I think Uwe Rosenberg is still probably the most influential for me, Uwe Rosenberg. But Rob Daviau is right up there. I've learned a lot from the way that Rob creates stories and memorable moments in his games. So those are two. But there's a lot I learned from a lot of different designers all the time. That's why I play a wide variety of games. Have you ever designed a published game that was virtually unplayable the first time you played the prototype? I love this question because the answer is almost every prototype. The first time I play it is virtually unplayable. Functionality. Just getting a game to be functional is an achievement. And it's pretty rare that a game plays out on the table as it plays out in my head. So yeah, Julie, I would say most games are not even playable the first time they get to the table. They're major things. And on the fly, sometimes we can fix those things just to make it playable. But rather quickly, sometimes I put a lot of work into making a prototype and then realize rather quickly it doesn't work. And that's why I try to do the rapid iteration, get something to the table simply and quickly to see if the core elements function at all before I delve deep into different abilities and the economies of the game, things like that. Yeah, I like that question. Luke says, just wanted to thank you for your recommendation about Disney Lorcana on the live stream in August. I've been playing in a weekly league since then and eventually attended a regional event in Atlanta. That's awesome, Luke. I've heard that people are having a lot of fun at those events. That's great. I'm glad you're having fun with Disney Lorcana. I am curious about the new cooperative mode that they recently released. Has anyone played that? The new Disney Lorcana? I think it's Ursula's Revenge, something like that. That sounds fun. Cody says, what are the logistics for working with someone like Alexander Pfister on a game and having Stonemaier publish it? Same way I think anyone would potentially work with us, where they submit a game submission on the submission page of our website. As for you, like if you are an unpublished designer and you want to work with a famous designer on a game, I think that probably depends on the designer. I think there are some designers out there that really love pairing up with someone else to work with someone else on a game. There's some designers that prefer to work alone. So you might look for designers who have often partnered up with more than one person on different games. So not always the same design partner, but often different people. Find those people. And I don't know what the next step is, but that would be the first step. Find people that clearly like partnering with, or find designers who clearly like partnering with different people on games, and to see what their workflow looks like. Learn a little bit more about that. Yeah, that's a fun question, Cody. Let's do one more ambassador question, then we'll call it a day. Oh, it's a Vantage question. Let's see if I can say it. How did you decide how big to make Vantage? In other words, 1,700 cards worth of content. It's 1,300 cards, but some of the cards are double-sided. So 1,700 cards worth of content is a staggeringly large number of cards. How did you decide the world would be 800 locations big? And there's a follow-up here about the maps. I don't have a good answer about the map. A lot of people have asked me about the shape of the world. It's a globe, but it's a grid for reasons, because I want people to be able to walk around the world, east or west, north to south. But as for the size of the game of Vantage, I really didn't know. I didn't have a rough idea of how big the world would be until we had created most of the world, and we realized that if I kept on adding new biomes to the world, that I would never complete the game. And so at a certain point, I said, okay, we have all the biomes. We just need to put them in the world and connect them. And so that was kind of a cap on the locations there. As for a cap on the cards that you discover as you're playing, so there are, around 800, is it 800? No, 900 cards that you can discover, 900 discoverable cards. That was just what I felt the game needed. And that wasn't a number that I decided upon. Just as I was designing the game, exploring the world, figuring out what players could do or could potentially do, that just became the number. So yeah, there wasn't really a decision in advance about that quantity. Luke says that the co-op is great. He highly recommends it. The difficulty scales well. That's awesome. Yeah, I am very curious to try that one. And one last question here from Chad. What has taken the most time in the design of Vantage? Really, it was very, very consuming to design the actions for each location. And that will make more sense soon when I talk about how the action system works. But it's with 800 different locations, or nearly 800 locations, to design content, unique content for each of those locations, took a long, long time. Yeah. All right. Thank you all for your questions today. Thank you for joining me. I'm sorry I didn't have a great question of the day for you, but I do appreciate your feedback and your thoughts. Yeah, it's always great to hang out with you for this hour. If you have any other questions, let me know in the comments, or in the description. As I said, I will post the survey to the apiary expansion, and I will see you next Wednesday. Have a great day. Have a great week. Take care. Bye.